meeting is being recorded.
We want to welcome.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yes. We're going to welcome everybody to the Journal-isms Roundtable. My name is Richard Prince, and I write a column called Journal-isms, journal-isms.com, which is about diversity issues in the news business. And this is an extension of that. We have been meeting since 1999. A bunch of friends started at a restaurant. We've been meeting at restaurants around DC, Washington, DC, until the pandemic. And then we went to Zoom, and our numbers quadrupled at least. And we were able to have people from around the country and even around the world actually join us. So that's sort of a silver lining to all that. So welcome, and particular welcome to people on Facebook, because that's also an extension of our Zoom. I wanted to start off by having a moment of silence for one of our participants who just made his transition, Askia Muhammad, who wrote a column in the Final Call and in the Washington Informer, and was the news director of WPFW here in Washington, and did all kinds of things, including being a photographer. He passed away about maybe about 10 days ago by now. And for those who don't know, they are having a memorial occasion for him that is called Each Other's Dreams, that will be held on Saturday, March 5th here in Washington, from 4 to 7 p.m. at Busboys and Poets on K Street. And for those of you who cannot be in Washington, or even those who are in Washington and can't be there in person, it will be broadcast live on WPFW in Washington. It's WPFWFM.com.org, I guess. And in New York at WBAI, which is also part of that Pacifica network. So let's have a moment of silence for Brother Askia Muhammad, who made innumerable contributions to journalism and to our group. Okay, thank you very much for that. We want to start off. I wanted to thank some folks who helped set this up. First of all, I don't know if Adam Powell is here yet, but this was all his idea, and Chester Higgins, of course, was very kind enough to kick this off. So we'll hear from him in a few, and Ted Ayers and Mark McCormick providing the Gordon Parks connection, which is good. Who else? Oh, of course, we can't forget NPPA, the National Press Photographers Association, which is co-sponsoring this. And I don't want to leave out our connection with American University, which are our new partners. And of course, Fred Sweets, who you've heard a few minutes ago, who helped out with our selection of participants. So thank all of you. I want to people who deserve to be toasted because they've got they're entering a new phase in their careers. And the first one I want to point out is Jeff Bennett, who is now at PBS and the NewsHour. He's been at NBC, MSNBC, NPR, New York One, and a guest host on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. And he slipped in very smoothly when Yamisha Sindor left the NewsHour to go to NBC. So we want to raise a glass and wish him well to Jeff Bennett. Congratulations, Jeff. Okay.
Thank
now,
you. I
of course, we
appreciate
want
that.
Jeff to say a few words about his plans. I left out your weekend, PBS NewsHour weekend, which is coming up. So Jeff. I don't see you on my screen, but I know you're here.
Can you see and hear me okay now?
All right, I'm going to switch screens here. Oh, there you are. Okay, gotcha.
Hey,
Yes.
Mr. Prince,
Yeah.
I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate the toast, and I am grateful for you inviting me to participate in this gathering today. It was interesting to hear you say that journalism has been around since 1999, because as I was thinking of it, I said, every job I've ever had, journalism was there, and you have been so encouraging to me throughout various points of my career. So this is great to see all these familiar faces and some names that I see there in the margins, people who have been either directly helpful or inspirational to me. So I appreciate that. And I have to say, I'm also heartened that sort of, my era of journalists, we're all sort of coming into our own at the same time. Yamiche at NBC, Abby Phillip at CNN, Aisha Roscoe was just named host of Weekend Edition Sunday for NPR, which is a show I used to be editor of back when Leanne Hansen and Rachel Martin were hosts of that show. Kenneth Moten and Rachel Scott over at ABC, Weijia Zhang at CBS. So I'm glad to be in that number, and we collectively have you folks to thank for knocking down doors to make our path a little easier. So I appreciate that.
Well, all right, thank you, Jeff. Okay, next I want to mention Arthur Cribbs. It was just yesterday, it seems, that we were toasting Arthur as Student Journalist of the Year for at NABJ, and now come to find out he has now gotten a job at the Washington Post. He had some jobs, some earlier jobs while he was in college, but this is quite impressive, landing a job almost out of school as a night editor at WashingtonPost.com. So Arthur, we want to toast you and see what you've got to say. Arthur.
Thank you, Mr. Prince, for inviting me again. I appreciate you just constantly keeping up with my life and again, this invitation. Working with the Washington Post, as you mentioned, I'll be on the night team as a homepage editor. And a big point of emphasis is really diversifying the homepage and creating more variety and really appealing to just a larger audience with the Washington Post. And so I'm hoping with this opportunity to really make the most out of it and really expanding readership and the audience for the Washington Post. So thank you again, Mr. Prince, for the invitation.
Here for Arthur. Okay. Now, let's see. I wanted to also mention is Corey Johnson here? Okay, we'll get that. Let me introduce everybody. All right, well, let's get right into.
Corey is there.
Yeah. Oh, Corey, you are here? Oh, very good. Okay. Corey is a recipient last week of he and his team of the George Polk Award for local reporting for the work he did, the series they did for the Tampa Bay Times. So we want to congratulate Corey and ask him to tell us a little bit about what that series was. Here.
Well, thank you as always, and thank everyone for the toast. The series is called Poison, and it's about how a local lead smelter, a local lead factory, the only lead factory left in the state of Florida, was grossly poisoning their workers, many of whom were Black and immigrants who were downtrodden. Some of them had a very low education. Some of them had been criminals and were trying to work a straight job to turn their lives around. Almost all of them didn't know that they were being poisoned, but they just saw that people were having heart attacks and strokes, sometimes at age 38, 32, 41, and they didn't know why. And so what we were able to find out by penetrating this private company was the company was grossly exposing them to levels of lead and other cancer-causing toxins, sometimes hundreds, thousands of times higher than the federal limit, way beyond what their protection equipment could guard against. And the government was so neglectful that they had basically abandoned their responsibilities at this plant. And so the stories prompted a tremendous amount of reaction and reforms. Reforms are still happening. The other piece that the story did, the story also exposed that this company had also polluted the community and was so well aware of the government rules that they cheated to falsify their data so they could look safer than what they truly were. And the effects of that exposure have reverberated to this very day, to where the government changed some of their processes and as a result caught the plant poisoning the air 5 times higher than what the rules allow. And so at a moment like this, when you get these individual accolades, I mean, it's very humbling because you think about the journey that you took, that you were blessed with actually to get to this moment. And so I'm very grateful for all the people who have supported me, who backed me, who've been there to dry up my tears and pay my bills when I couldn't pay them myself, who wrote the letters of recommendation and all the various things that I needed to happen just to get an opportunity. And if anything, I'm hope that the stories and the accolades will shine more attention on the people who are suffering, who were not being heard, as well as newsrooms. I hope it will spur newsrooms to give people like me, people who look like me, and others opportunities to do investigative reporting and tell some of these more difficult stories. So anyway.
Can people look at your series online?
Yes, they can. If they, you can Google Tampa Bay Times Poisoned. I'll drop a link in here as well. And you can read to your heart's content.
Thank you. That's a great segue because I forgot to mention the value of the chat room. These roundtables are for to network and to learn, I say. And because we're on Zoom and not there in person, but we do have the chat room, and a lot of networking goes on there. You can say something to everybody, and everybody will be getting a copy of the remarks afterward, or you can network with somebody individually and just chat just with that person. So please do take advantage of that. Now I want to turn to Kansas, and since this is about photojournalists of color, Gordon Parks is basically the godfather of today's photojournalists of color. And so we have Ted Ayers here and Mark McCormick, who are from Kansas. And I wanted Ted to just set this up, give us a little background about Gordon Parks.
Thank you, Richard. And I am very privileged to be with all of you. It's an extreme honor for me to be with you and also to have the opportunity to talk about a personal hero of mine, Gordon Parks. Mr. Parks was born in Fort Scott, Kansas on November 30th, 1912. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today comes from my personally autographed copy of his book, A Choice of Weapons, which he wrote in 1965. And I'm going to fast forward to December of 1937, when Mr. Parks, he was at the time a porter on a train that ran from Chicago to Seattle. And on time off, he went to a theater and watched a newsreel of a photographer by the name of Alvin Alley. And the newsreel involved the showing of Japanese planes bombing a United States ship. And it was quite dramatic, quite realistic. And then Norman Alley was introduced to the crowd and received a standing ovation. And Gordon writes that I sat through another show, and even before I left the theater, I had made up my mind I was going to become a photographer. And then he goes on to talk about being in Seattle and buying a Voigtlander Brilliant camera at a pawn shop for $12.50. He said there were probably better cameras in the shop, but only one had that professional look which suited my taste, a Voigtlander Brilliant. I liked that name, and when he told me it was only $12.50, I hurriedly pulled the money from my pocket. Then I want to fast forward to January of 1942. Mr. Parks was working as a photographer in various opportunities, but received a Rosenwald fellowship, and he used that fellowship to support his employment at the Farm Security Administration, which was a New Deal program utilizing photographers to demonstrate poverty and rural life in the United States. And so Mr. Parks reported to duty in January of 1942, and he first met with the head of the Farm Security Administration, a gentleman by the name of Roy Stryker. And in their initial meeting, Stryker asked Parks what he wanted to accomplish. Stryker then suggested that Parks get out and explore Washington, D.C. Quote, walk around the city, get to know it, buy yourself a few things. That walk around the city for Mr. Parks, as he describes in the book, was a brittle, hurtful, and disappointing eye-opener for the young man from Kansas. He felt the sting of racial discrimination. And when he went back, well, let me just iterate that Parks went to a restaurant to have a meal, and he was told, no, we don't serve color. He went to a theater to buy a ticket. He was told, colored people can't go in here. You should know that. He then went to one of the fine department stores in DC, Julius Garfinkel's, wanted to buy a camel hair coat. And his experience there was just awful. He was ignored, wasn't waited on, and made to sit without anybody paying any attention to him. So he goes back to Stryker and describes all this. And he told Stryker, quote, I want to show the rest of the world what your great city of Washington, D.C. is really like. Stryker then had a moment with Parks, and he said, and this is Gordon talking about that conversation with Roy Stryker. Young man, you're going to facts down here. Whatever else it may be, this is a southern city. Whether you ignore it or tolerate it is up to you. I purposely sent you out this morning so that you could just see what you're up against. He paused for a moment to let this sink in. Then he continued, you're going to find all kinds of people in Washington, and a good cross-section of the types are right here in this building. You'll have to prove yourself to them, especially the lab people. They are damn good technicians, but they are all Southerners. I do think they will respect good craftsmanship. Once you get over that hurdle, I honestly believe you will be accepted as another photographer, not just as a Negro photographer. Stryker then tells Mr. Parks to put his experience on paper. Go home and just write your feelings. Gordon comes back. Well, Stryker elaborates. When Gordon asked him, put what on paper, Stryker said, put down your plan for fighting those things you say you just went through. Think it out constructively. It won't be easy. You can't take a picture of a white salesman, waiter, or ticket seller and just say they are prejudiced. That isn't enough. You've got to verbalize the experience first, then find logical ways to express it in pictures. The right words, too, are important. They should underscore your photographs. Think in terms of images and words. They can be mighty powerful when they are fitted together properly. So Gordon, as he writes, went home and wrote of just about every injustice he had ever experienced in Kansas, Minnesota, Chicago, New York, and Washington. Those words were all forged together in the heat of the blast. When he took those words back to Mr. Stryker, Stryker said, well, you've had quite a time, but here's what else I want you to do. And he took Gordon over to file folders with photographs of the people that were working for Farm Security Administration, including, and he started with Dorothea Lange. And Stryker says, spend the rest of the day going through this set of pictures. Every day, take on another drawer. And go back and write more specifically about your visual approach to things. So Gordon writes, for several weeks, I went through hundreds of photographs by Lange, Russell Lee, Jack Delano, Carl Meidens, John Bacton, Arthur Rothstein, Ben Shawn, Walker Evans, John Collier, and others. The disaster of the 30s was at my fingertips. The gutted cotton fields, the eroded farmland, the crumbling South, the unending lines of dispossessed migrants, the pitiful shacks, the shameful city ghettos, the bread lines and bonus marchers, the gaunt faces of men, women, and children caught up in the tragedy, the horrifying spectacles of sky blackened with locusts, and swirling dust in towns flooded with muddy waters. There were some, no doubt, who laid these tragedies to God. But research accompanying these stark photographs accused man himself, especially the lords of the land, in their greed and passion for wealth, and this is appropriate with what we just heard. In their greed and passion for wealth, they had gutted the earth for cotton, overworked the farms, exploited the tenant farmers and sharecroppers who, broken, took to the highways with their families in search of work. They owned the ghettos as well as the impoverished souls who inhabited them. No, the indictment was against man, not God. The proof was there in those ordinary steel files. It was a raw slice of contemporary America, clear, hideous, and beautifully detailed in images and words. I began to get the point.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Where can they get more information about what you're talking about?
Well, of course, Gordon in his life was prolific in many, many ways. And Choice of Weapons is just one of 4 memoirs that he wrote. And I think all of those are still in print. And likewise, all of his poetry books, his photography books. So there's a wide collection of his work that's available in, I think, bookstores, libraries, or certainly used bookstores. And there is also, and I think you provided this, Richard, in our work at Wichita State with preserving the collection of the papers from Mr. Parks, which came out of his apartment after he died there in New York City in the United Nations Plaza apartment building. Wichita State University had the opportunity to receive those collected papers, and they have been sorted, digitized, and made available on the internet. And those URLs that you provided, I think, Richard, would be a wonderful background place to start to learn more about Mr. Parks from his time in Kansas and moving forward.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks again, Ted. I forgot to mention earlier that we're having a special expert roundtable on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, before the State of the Union address, and this is on Ukraine and the invasion. And Malcolm Nance will be with us talking about that, as well as Remy Adekoye, who is a Polish Nigerian who was born in Nigeria, but spent 19 years in Poland and lives in Britain. He teaches there and is also a journalist. So he has an interesting perspective on what's going on there. So that'll be at 7 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. So those who want to should let me know, and we'll accommodate you. All right, now we have, speaking of photography,
Chester,
which will suit your coffee table. It's 200 and some odd pages about it's called Sacred Nile, and it's about antiquity. And all of us who grew up learning about ancient Greece and ancient Rome, they forgot to tell us that there were other places in the world that were thriving at that time as well. So I'm going to turn this over now so that Chester Higgins can take the floor.
Thank you very much. I'm so fortunate to be invited to be a part of this group today. You know, so much of our history has been censored. and and communication, information that has been hidden from us. A lot of it is in open places, but we just need to research and find out where these open places are and how this stuff comes together. And this book, Sacred Nile, is about the migration of faith along the River Nile. It's looking at what I would call the world before Genesis, and how the world before Genesis is what the Abrahamic Bible stands on the shoulders of Kemet, which comes out of the Black land. The earliest philosophers who tried to tackle the issues of who we are, where we are, and what's our meaning and our relationship to the divine are still in stone. Their faces and their ceremonies are in stone in Egypt for us to look at, and in museums across the world. In most museums, the most prized collection is that of the ancient Egyptians. But colonialism tried to separate Egypt from Africa, tried to make it part of the Middle East, because the British actually found that they had a problem. Because on one hand, you couldn't help but be in awe and have utmost respect for what's left behind of the Egyptian culture. What we're looking at in Egypt in the artifacts actually is looking at a carcass. But they had a problem because they wanted to be great like the Egyptians. But they also wanted to oppress everybody who did not look like them, especially Africans. So they could not have this confusion that Africans could know that they came from something great. So I tell people that the product of this work is this book that I'm so happy to be able to live long enough to finish since my first trip in 1973 in Egypt and Ethiopia. But it's all, and telling the story of migration. But I say that, it's a message here too, that, our history did not begin at the bottom of a slave ship. If you want the history of African people, you have to go back to ancient Egypt. It did not begin at the bottom of a slave ship or dispossession by colonizers. So if I can share my screen, I want to just run through very quickly a lot of what these pictures look like. And if there are any questions about the photography, let's see, how do I do this? Files.
Just to first bring up the image that you want to show on your screen first.
Okay, so let me get out of this. Open my image screen first. Very good. Okay. And then I go to share.
Share screen.
I don't get it. I'm not seeing it. I'm getting Microsoft OneDrive, Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, Microsoft SharePoint. On the files, I click to advance. I get virtual slides as a virtual background. I go to basics. There it is. Okay. Thank you. So here, in the beginning of the book, I show this because those of us who are familiar with pyramids are familiar with the pyramids of Egypt, which are most impressive. They're 35 stories high. So next time you're in a building on the 35th floor, look out. That's what you see if you're at the top of the pyramid. And those pyramids are what we would call classic because they are 45-degree angle. And Egypt has almost 100 pyramids. But in Sudan, in Nubia, they have several hundred, almost 500 footprints. But what's left behind maybe is 100. And they are at a 60-degree incline, and they only go about 12 feet high. And the technology is different because in the Egyptians, they mastered the technology of building a room with a flat ceiling that would not be compressed or by the stones above it. The Sudanese technology was different. They dug out the grave, the tomb first underneath, and then they built the pyramids on top. The Holy Family. We've heard in the Bible about the Holy Family, but there's something missing in this Holy Family that we get. And what's missing is the woman. The woman becomes a ghost. The patriarchal religion eliminated the divinity of the African woman, of women, period. In the world before Genesis, the woman is an equal divine partner. She and her husband have a son, yes, and that son came from an impossible birth, just like Mary, but that son still has a mother, and that mother is is not only the guarantor of that son's ruler becoming a ruler, but also that son, in one version of the Holy Mother, that mother is the mother of immortality, because she takes the seed of a dead person, the impossible birth, and gives birth. This is one of my trips to Ethiopia. During the course of this work, this is personal work, personal money, personal time. This is one of the images from Ethiopia of a river that's a tributary to the Nile. Because the reason I discovered the reason why the Nile goes north is because it starts 6,000 feet above sea level in the highlands of Ethiopia and Lake Tana, and then drifts down the Nile Trench into Sudan, into Egypt, and empties into the Mediterranean. This is a picture of King Tut. Many of you may not know that King Tut, this was his complexion. This is a complexion of his. This is from one of the mannequins came from his tomb of him in a t-shirt. This is the Nile. This book is about water, because water was the superhighways of the ancient world. People migrated along the water. They migrated in woods as well, but the migration along the water, following the path of the water, they could then move into different areas as well. So that's how people got out of Ethiopia. And I show you here, the earliest human being is the fossilized image, 3.2 million years old, of a woman in Ethiopia. The Europeans call her Lucy, the Ethiopians call her Denkwanesh. And then on the left, it shows you I'm doing astrophotography, because I discovered in reading the Egyptian text that they thought that not only when your soul of the king dies, it goes to heaven, it goes to a very specific point in heaven. It goes to the belt of Orion. And not only is the River Nile the thing that keeps Egypt alive and make Egypt what it is, they felt that a reflection in the sky of the River Nile was the Milky Way. Here's a tributary on the map. I had a cartographer make a map for me after I discovered from topographical maps how the landscape of the Nile affected the flow of the river, to show people that, Egypt is a part of Africa. I often say when I talk to Egyptologists that I find it very difficult respecting people who can't read maps. And here, so all of you can see, you can show your friends that Egypt is a part of Northeast Africa. Some of the monumental buildings left behind. On the right, what the Ethiopian highlands look like. On the left, the pyramids that we're familiar with. The Sphinx, the water again, and here, the 13th century. First, I have to say that Ethiopia became Christian in 324 AD. 324 AD, 4th century. The 13th century, after their pilgrims were being killed by the Muslims who had taken over Egypt in the 7th century, and the Ethiopian Christians would make their pilgrimage to Jerusalem, like Muslims make theirs to Mecca. And after so many of their pilgrims being killed by the Muslims, who decided that if you rescue converts, you'll be killed, King Lalibela decided to build his own Jerusalem in Ethiopia by digging it out from the mountains themselves for two reasons. And one is a very ancient practice. You see it in Egypt, how that particular architecture was used in the Temple of Abu Simbel, but also they had to protect themselves from the invading armies of the Egyptians and Sudanese Muslims who would attack places where they saw there was a church. So this way, if you built your churches underground, when the attacking armies used their telescopes, they would not see that there was a village here. On the right, a very important lesson that's been censored out of history is that the role of women. Women, yes, we have very important women who were kings and rulers of Egypt, but we have far more who were rulers of Sudan. And the title and they had the title not of Pharaoh, they had the title of Kandake. And those of you who read the Bible where it talks about Queen of Sheba, Candace, Queen of Sheba, it's the English corruption of the word K-A-N-D-A-C-E, Kandake. The papyrus boats that are still used, looking at religion as it was practiced in the 3,500 years BC, that's 5,500 years ago. In the middle, Ethiopian Hebrews, Ethiopian Jews. On the right, Ethiopian Muslims. So in this book, we've looked at all 4 religions, major religions. They're still in Ethiopia living. So you have Islam, you have Christianity, you have Judaism, and you have the religion of nature. People who believe, as the Egyptians believed, that nature is the perfect example of divinity. And what we as humans have to do is find a way to copy that divinity so that we can make the world better and be at peace. Here on the right, divine woman, 2 divine, a goddess, divine woman, Hathor, and the divine woman, the wife of Ramses Nefertari. And on the very left, divine woman making an offering. All of these divine women, they existed in the world before Genesis. The first thing the Abrahamic faith did is not only did they do away with the woman, but they saddled her with all this original sin in the world. And the men went free, kind of like a rapist. That's what the Adam and Eve story is all about. Here you see those churches that have been dug out of rock. This is what they look like in Ethiopia. They're huge. Well, I'm going to show you the interior one pretty soon. This is the Pope of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, baptizing the Golden Cross to purify it. People in nature baptizing themselves inside of some of the temples left behind. On the right is the interior of that big church I just told you about. What they did is this is incredible. They went to the mountaintop. They did a footprint of a church, and they started digging 40 feet around that footprint, and they went 40 feet down. So when they had finished excavating all the exterior rock, what they had was a monolithic piece of stone. Then they went back to that monolithic piece of stone and made a sculpture. They dug out the windows, they dug out the doors, they dug out the interior, they dug the pillars, everything. Incredible piece of architecture. This is what it looks like. You go there today, you see there are no pews, there's no place to sit except down on the floor or stand. They have these, what they call prayer sticks. You put them on your arm and you stand on them. But that's their church. But the other thing about that church too is interesting that it harkens back to the time of the temple in Jerusalem and the Egyptian temples, is that being farmers, church was something that people start at 4:30 in the morning. And what stopped you is when the sun rise. Then that's when you go to work in your farm. So sunrise was the blessing of a new day. It was that the prayers have been answered. And it was this, and I remind people that if you read the Bible where it talks about when Christ was being captured by the Roman soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane, it happened when? Because he makes the point to his traitor that before the cock crows twice, you would have denied me thrice. Anyone who's on a farm knows that the chicken rooster does not wait to sunrise to start crowing. The rooster starts crowing an hour before sunrise. So this is the calendar, obviously, that the Romans, the Israelis were using, and that the Egyptians and now the Ethiopians still use. This is the rising sun in between the temple doors that opens up in the morning. This is a woman pilgrim in Ethiopian church. This whole spread has to do with the temple of the woman, the divinity of the woman. How in Ethiopia, you still have these temples among the Oromo people who believe in the sacredness and divinity of the woman that only men can go in. I was only able to photograph this because the woman who was doing her PhD needed a picture. And she had the relationship that allowed me to go in to make a picture at the beginning of the ceremony. Then I had to leave. In Egypt, you see in the middle, the temple of the woman. You see the picture of the woman. She has the cow ears. In all of the scenes in the Holy Bible about nativity scene, there is one animal that has to be there, and that's the animal of the cow. The cow represents mother. The cow gives the liquid that sustains life. There's sacred trees, a look of Ethiopia like at the valley of civilization, the dawn from the mountains. Here you have Islamic rituals, sacred caves, sacred cave for Christians. The Hebrews in Ethiopia, they don't call this shofar, they call it the meleket. You have the ritual, the people who believe in nature with the sacred tree by the water. And then you have the temples that are left behind. Here's a temple made in Sudan by the grandfather of Tutankhamun, a temple to the moon, that goes about 6 stories high in Ethiopia. And then you have these staffs that you see that repeats themselves in the Egyptian iconography. And it's a staff of authority, a staff that you can adjudicate. And this funny looking bird head is the head of the scribe, the one who his job is to write down what is going on in front of it. Here's the Nile going through the highlands of Ethiopia, heading down to Sudan. Notice how high the mountain is. You see the clouds below the mountain. This is at 6,000 feet above sea level. In Ethiopia, people live 6,000 feet to 15,000 feet above sea level. The huge temples in Egypt of Ramses the Great, these statues are about 65 feet high. Here you have some of the columns in the temples left behind in Egypt. You have Ethiopian Hebrews, Ethiopian Muslims. This huge mountain in Sudan that they say is the birthplace of Amen. Amen, or Amen, is the top god of the Egyptians and the Nubians. They believe that the sun was the window unto the residence of Amen. That Amen is a God that you can't see, the invisible God. But then they take it a step further and they give credit to the woman because they say that the sun comes out of the night sky. And why is that important? Because they had left behind these drawings where they conceptualized the night sky as the long, lean body of an African woman. And in that body, she was stretched over the solar poles of the planet. So her foot is in the east and her arms are in the west. And in the west, when the sun sets, her arms become a runway for the sun to ride up into, and she swallows it. Where the sun uses her body overnight to regenerate itself. And while it's regenerating itself, she wears a dress with holes in it. And those holes show you the sprinkling of the light that's coming out, we call stars. And then in the morning, she gives birth to the sun. Her son becomes the S-U-N, our son. The Christians somehow couldn't get rid of it completely, so that's how we ended up with Sunday. But we don't get the history behind it. Here's the church, that big church again, showing it the first time I saw it in 1974 at temples of Abu Simbel, shrines with the Black Madonna in Ethiopia, the rock churches, and you can see the wall around the church. This is the smallest one in Ethiopia. It's an incredible place. Churches, mosque here in Egypt, the churches in Ethiopia traditionally are in the round. Then the temple to the woman in Egypt, they call it temple to Philae. And then on the right, it's a temple to the Father, Amen, which is we call the temple of Karnak. An Ethiopian priest reading off the vellum, off the language of Guz, which is their ancient language. Today they speak Amharic. Guz is to Amharic like Latin is to English or French. So drama. What I'm trying to do with all my work, all my photography, is make sure that up front is the issues that we of decency, dignity, and virtuous character. We are a great people. We have a great history, and we're not perfect, but we have come through great times, and the world has flipped on us since the time of the ancient Egyptians. But hey, with faith and with history, with knowledge who we are, we have the ability to flip it back. The right is a church, the temple of the woman. On the left is a Christian interior. Here you have the Ethiopian Hebrews. I say Hebrews, they say Hebrews because Jewish is a European construction. Then you have the interiors of the churches, Christian churches. Look at these saints. You have the first saint from ancient Egyptian time, ancient Nubian time, as an angel. You have the angels on the ceiling. It's like the Sistine Chapel of this church in Gondar in Ethiopia. Then you have in the Holy Trinity Church, look at this angel. And then you have in different other churches, the balancing Acts, and then below that, the Egyptian gave us in this particular tomb. And I want people just to, if I can just leave you with two different things to look up for yourself. One of them is called Unas, U-N-A-S. It's in the tomb of Unas, who back in 2500 BCE had engraved in stone, chiseled in stone in his tomb, 330 lines of Holy Scripture. And in that Holy Scripture, he talks about creation, he talks about spirit, soul, ascension to heaven, all of the things that that are now up front in religious terminology. Here on the bottom right scene, we see an image of a little bird sitting up on a white house. That's an angel. We see here the ceremony of what's called, before you can go to heaven, you have to pass this particular ceremony. You have to declare your innocence. That ceremony has 42 commandments. The Bible took 10 of them. The other 32 was a little bit much. So you pass those commandments where your heart is weighed against a feather. In heaven, you go to heaven to Osiris, which is the 5,000 years before Jesus was ever thought about. All of the paradigms in the Bible of the most fundamental mythology comes out of Egypt. I didn't know that until I started studying this. Here you have Akhenaten, where people talk about worshiping the sun. So the Greek people who really didn't understand what they were looking at said, well, these people are sun worshipers because they look to the sun. Sure, they look to the sun because if they believe in nature, the strongest force in nature is the sun. But they also believe that the sun was merely the window into the residence of the Almighty. And that, anybody would know that if the sun gave out for a week, the planet would freeze. So the sun is a very important place. And what's the power behind it that generates it? Amen and Nut. And that's N-W, Nut, the woman Nut. Most people spell it, and I spell it in the book as N-U-T, but should be pronounced as N-W-T. So here's a burial scene in a tomb. This man in the middle is dead. The wife has a sistrum behind him, and they're both supplicating on the right, Osiris, the Lord of the death, the one who has gone to death and who's there to await us. And you see that the mourning color is white, and Osiris is dark or sometimes green, which represents rebirth. Here you have an African-American woman who's come back with her sistrum. There more and more African-Americans are traveling to Egypt now to pay homage to the ancient ancestors who've discovered that this is part of their sacred legacy. And here you have the feather of Shu. The ceilings in all these tombs have the stars above them. They're apartments of eternity. And then on the right, you have the opening of the mouth ceremony with King Tut, who's dead and now in his white, who's being administered this ceremony by his successor, who has the cloak of a priest, which is a garment that is made up of the leopard. And then the Ethiopians have their vestments too. And their vestments seems like it harkens back to the same thing of elements of the carcass of the leopard. So it goes on and on. I've had great, these 5 decades of working on this book has been the best of my life, and I hope I have time to do another one. This is the Church of St. George at Lalibela again. So look up Lalibela, L-A-L-I-B-E-L-A.
Oh, okay.
And for Ethiopia, and then for Egypt, look up Unas, U-N-A-S. And the last thing would be to look up the Oromo people who now also still believe in the sky. This is the pyramids you know about. My mummies of Ramses the Great. Photographing mummies are really, it was very interesting because you're confronting a death that you don't really, aren't used to seeing. And then you're confronting a personality that is still there, that's thousands of years that you're removed, thousands of years away. And then, and here's that tomb of Unas, the 331 lines of Holy Scripture. It's still there. You can go see it. Here's a mourning scene. Women are mourning the death of someone in a casket being pulled by. Here's the largest tomb in the Valley of the Kings of Seti, who was very well loved. Here's the tomb of this woman who is a Kandaki from the Nubians, Queen Kahata. And photographically, this was the most challenging picture of all the pictures that I had to make. Because the first year I went, first of all, there's no lights, pitch dark. You go down with a guide and has a flashlight. You can see a little piece at a time. And I'm not knowing this, only thing I had was a flash on my camera. I use a flash on my camera and I get a little circle, not much brighter than the flashlight. So then I go back another year and I try to use another system, continuous light system, but I gave out a battery power. So I had to go back to third year, having learned from all those previous lessons of what I needed, how to make those two rooms sing, and using the tripod, using the diffuse lighting and zoning it, that I was able to really show the magnificence of this tomb of this woman, Queen Kahata. Here you have on the left, you have the Queen Nefertari being led into her eternity by Isis. And King Tut, that all of you heard of. In fact, King Tut was discovered 100 years ago, come November. He had been traveling undisturbed for 3,500 years before tomb robbers found him. These are tombs from Ethiopia, some of the pyramids in Ethiopia, the Nile River as it makes its bend. This is the sarcophagus of Haile Selassie, the last emperor of Ethiopia. And this is the night sky that I had to learn mountain hiking, climbing. And I spent about 15 years doing yoga to strengthen me up and balance. And this is from 8,600 feet above sea level, trying to look at that Milky Way that the Egyptians are so enthralled with. And here's King Tut in his coffin, golden coffin of eternity. And the left behind symbol with Queen Hatshepsut being shown as the chosen one of Amen. And I ended with where we started, where the river starts its fall out of Ethiopia in the Blue Nile River Falls, or what they call Tissisat, 6,000 feet above sea level. I hope you all get a chance to get this book and enjoy it for yourself and share it with your friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Tell us, or at least put it in the chat, I guess, where people can get the book.
Well, Amazon.com, everybody gets it there.
Oh, I see. There's another question. Somebody wants to know about getting an autographed copy of the book.
Well, if you can get that from my distributor, which is, if you go to sacrednow.com, it'll take you to my distributor, which is BCH Fulfillment. And they're upstate New York, and I go up and I sign like 50 books at a time. So they have books signed. You get in touch with them and tell them you want a signed book.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, thanks so much. I see it just in the chat, all these kudos and accolades for this presentation. So we want to thank you, Chester.
Thank you, thank you.
Yes, yes. All right,
Richard?
let's move on to our
Richard, can I ask a quick question?
All right.
Okay, just a real quick question. I just want to know whether the book actually has the lengthy explanations and educational aspect that you gave.
Absolutely. You got to enjoy it. I want to make sure that people had the information. So in one place that you have that visual evidence, because somebody could just tell you the story, but I wanted to show you visual evidence as well as show you the research that we did. And excellent. I think you did that research, and we wrote it in a way that you do not have to be a scholar. You do not have to be a PhD. It's made so that a high school graduate can understand it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. This is, as I said, we'll get back to Chester when we have our discussion and our question period. So I want to thank him again. Let's go on to our panel discussion of the journalists of color. I'd like to have, I guess, each of the panelists, and we'll go in alphabetical order, introduce themselves and start off by just 3 minutes max, and begin by answering the question, how does your background, your ethnic background, racial background, whatever, influence kind of work you do? So let's start with Maria de Jesus. Are you there, Maria?
Hello, everyone. I am Maria
Yes.
Jesus. I am NPPA president. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invite. I am Puerto Rican, born and raised, and a staff photographer at the Houston Chronicle. And I believe that as a Puerto Rican woman, queer, I think it gave me an ability to be extra sensitive to the scenes that I encounter with. So every time that I go to crisis, I tend to imagine, I try to work with people the way that I expect journalists to work with my parents if they were going to like my parents' place during Hurricane Maria. That type of sensitivity, type of respect, empathy. Also, I think that I bring a warmth that it's very traditional and normal in my people. Puerto Ricans, we tend to be very empathetic, very open, and I think that that's one of the most wonderful things I bring to the table as a Latina photographer.
Excellent, excellent. I think Monica Herndon is next from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Herndon. I'm a staff photographer at the Philadelphia Inquirer, where I've been for about 2 years. I'm also chair of the NABJ Visual Task Force, where a number of you have had involvement over the years. And so, I was raised in a journalism family. My father is also on this phone call, but
Wave, Craig.
I think that my background as a Black person working in journalism, it's really made me more aware of how Black people have been covered historically, and kind of helped me to see how I can change coverage, on a small day-to-day basis. It encourages me to seek out more Black stories, and even just on regular assignments, seeking out Black people to make sure that everyone can be seen visually.
Excellent. Okay. Carl Just. I don't have my list in front of me, so I hope I'm not leaving anybody out yet. Carl.
Yes, everyone. Thank you for having me. I have been working for the Herald for 30 plus years. I am of birthright of Haitian descent, born in Haiti actually, and my mother's Cuban and my father's Haitian, and we left Haiti because my father was against the Duvalier regime and sought political exile in the States back in the 50s. And we moved down to Miami because it got too damn cold in New York. And my dad wanted closer to home, closer to Haiti. I mean, Miami is a city built on a bunch of residents who are trying to get back home. And I have tried to do my work concentrating on this idea of home. I am a co-founder of Iris Photo Collective. I also operate a art space called IBC Art Space, and I'm about to engage in another practice in bringing monetization of photojournalism into the market. I believe that photojournalism is art. I think it is the one of the most important contemporary art expressions, and I make that argument both in gallery spaces and museum spaces. What we do is not about the product, but about the process. Our integrity is our true value. The way we are able to navigate multiple spaces and operate both in the past, present, and future is very unique. And our ability to be truth tellers and using the primary language, the visual language as a way to connect, to redefine, to identify I think it's extremely important. So I'm blessed to be on this panel. I know a lot of y'all, and I have had the privilege of meeting y'all, and I think each of y'all has some influence onto my lovely career, and I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my life, and hopefully
All
I'll be
right,
with
thank
Chester
you,
with an
Carl.
amazing book.
Hyungwon Kang.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. Thank you, Fred, for making the introduction. I am a Korean American born in South Korea, but grew up in Los Angeles since 1970s. Even when I was attending UCLA, I couldn't believe how ignorant my political science professors were when it comes to history and knowledge about ancient civilizations of the Asia. And for the next 33 years, when I worked in the mainstream media at LA Times, AP, and Reuters, I ran across just countless occasions where this absence of knowledge about Korean culture and civilization was interfering with the storytelling in American media. So I corrected what I can when I was working, but as soon as I retired from Reuters, I jumped in this project called Visual History of Korea, where I'm making first impressions with pictures about Korean history and culture, like what Chester Higgins has just done for the last 50 years. I've been doing that for the last 2 years during pandemic, and the soon to be published by Random House, A Visual History of Korea, will show photographic evidence of what history and culture of Korea is, that most of the people in English language and cultures are oblivious about. And this visual storytelling training, which I have received over the years in American media, is finally has come to fruition in 21st century, because in the internet, the photography is the language, universal language that everybody can relate with. So if there's no pictures and no videos, there's no stories in journalism anymore. And I feel like having been trained as a visual journalist has finally given me all the necessary skills and qualifications to do the storytelling that everybody can understand. And I look forward to sharing my work with you in the future. Thank you again.
All right, thank you. All right, Eugene Tapahi. Are you there?
Yes, yeah, my name is Eugene Tapahi. Yate, everybody. I'm glad I'm able to have been joining you today. I am Dene Navajo from Window Rock, Arizona. I have been in the journalism field over 30 years. I'm a former managing editor of the Navajo Times newspaper. Also sat on the board of the Native American Journalists Association also. And I've been involved in journalism for a long time, and I see a lot of familiar faces here during our Unity conferences. I remember some of you from then. I was highly involved in the Native student journalism programs, and it was a pleasure to be able to serve in those areas. Right now, I'm going back to school at BYU to get my master's in fine art, and
at Brigham Young, correct?
Yes, at Brigham Young University. Okay. And I've been covering Native issues for most of my life, and a lot of the things I've been doing, I've gone to Standing Rock. I wrote a book and have a photography book about Standing Rock, and I've been to a lot of the major situations that are happening with Native people. Currently, I'm working on projects with the missing murdered Indigenous women, and also with the residential schools. I'm working on trying to do some photography stories and things like that with those issues. I try really hard to use photography to tell stories, and I always tell everybody, foremost, I'm a storyteller, and I believe that we have the ability as photographers to tell a story within an image. And a lot of times I feel like, at least for me, I feel like our images can actually heal those situations and be able to bring people to a conversation. I'm currently working on a project that's called Art Heals, the Jingle Dress Project. And it's a photography documentary of being able to record the healing Ojibwe jingle dress dance across America. And I've been able to document many places and gone to certain areas at certain times during the pandemic that have been huge. We actually went to Mount Rushmore right after the presidential rally there. And we were just days before the Capitol was taken over. We were there at the Capitol taking images and having the girls dance there. So we've been able to go to places historically that have been, through this COVID and through the racial differences that we've been having in the past, few years, has really impacted a lot of my photography that I've been doing. And I'm really grateful to be here. I don't know if there's any other natives out there. I haven't seen any of them. So I'm glad that I can at least be here to represent our Native people. Thank you.
We couldn't have lost Richard.
Yeah.
Do we have to we call 911?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Richard.
I don't see his face.
I don't see him up here anymore.
I'm sure he'll be
back.
He disappeared.
Luckily, there's a co-host.
Yeah, who's the co-host?
Just give him a minute. Hold on a second. We'll be right with you.
That happened to me once when I had a guest speaker in one of my classes at Oregon, and I got bumped out of the room.
Well, I don't know if you can hear me. This is Bob Black. I just joined the conversation in the middle of Chester's presentation.
Hey, everybody, Richard is on the line. Tell us, Richard, what's going on?
My computer just died.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Should we bring you a new one?
Can he do it on his phone? Yes.
Can you do it on your phone?
Richard,
trying to do it on the phone right now.
yeah, Richard, log in from your phone, and just log in from your phone.
Bob Black joins Don Hogan Charles among the first photographers at their newspapers. So go on, Bob, you were about to say.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's great to see everybody. And Fred, it's great to see you, and Chester, those pictures are magnificent. I need to talk to you just one-on-one when we get a chance.
Okay.
Because they were very inspirational, I'll tell you.
Well, I give you my number right now.
Okay. But yeah, it's been a long journey for me. I was the first Black photographer at the Sun-Times, but I was the second one overall at the Chicago papers. There was a guy who preceded me by the name of John Tweedle, and he was the first Black photographer to punch through the hole at the downtown papers. And he went to the Daily News, and later on I joined the Sun-Times. So, but it's been the time that I joined the paper, it was in 1968. And that turned out to be a very tumultuous year. As you know, Dr. King was assassinated, and that happened a month to the day after I joined the paper. And so I thought that I didn't know what to do, and I became an important cog in the wheels of the paper because I knew where to go to get the shots that were going to be needed for the next day's paper. So without me there, I think they would have had a tough time. And then Bobby Kennedy was assassinated later on in that year. We had the 1968 Democratic Convention that tore the city apart. And what else? Oh, well, yeah, black students at Northwestern University took over the administration building right on the heels of the Columbia University takeover. And so they had, the students had decided they weren't going to have any white press people come into the building, And so I got there, and when I looked up, I saw one of my old editors from the Defender, where I had just worked for almost 2 years. And I saw him come out the window, and I went over to him and I told him, I said, "Hey, can you get me in there?" He said, "Oh, no, I can't get you in there. You don't work for me anymore." I said, "Yes, I know, but they don't know that, so come on, let me in." He said, "Well, okay, you're gonna owe me." So he got me in the window, and I stayed in there for maybe an hour, maybe 3 hours. Got out of there, got my stuff downtown. Now I was nervous because I didn't know what those students were going to be, what they were going to say if the paper did not support them. So fortunately for me, the paper did support them, and they had an editorial supporting the students' move and why they were doing it. And the next day, the students changed their policy and said only Black people can come in, Black press people, no matter what company you work for. As long as you was Black, you could get in. But it's been a great time. I've been there 38 years. I retired in 2006. And but I still shoot whenever I get the chance.
I have a question for all of the photographers. We could go around the horn. What was the most insulting moment in your career because of your race, and how did you deal with it, and how did you process it mentally after that moment, whether it was an insult or abject racism, or we all may have that story, but let's go around the horn of photographers and hear about it.
Well, the only one I've had, because once I work for the Times, everybody's going to be nice because they want to be in the Times. But yeah. As a freelancer, I started out, after Look magazine died, I did a freelance job for Time magazine. And I think the editor, the Southern white woman, really didn't like me, but she felt my work was good enough. So she sent me to photograph this guy named Rabbi Kahane. Anybody ever heard of him?
Meyer Kahane.
Yeah.
Jewish Defense League.
Yeah, I heard of him.
So he gave me this address. He's like on some building on 42nd Street between like 9th and 10th Avenue. So I go to the door, knock on the door, and this guy sticks his head through the door, a real thuggish looking guy, and he says, "Who are you?" I said, "What do you want?" So while I'm here, I'm with Time magazine, I'm here to photograph Rabbi Kahane. So he says, "Wait here." He slams the door. And he comes back after a few minutes and he opens up the door and he walked me down this long corridor. And on either side of these thugs, you're standing like attention to the back, to the wall, and I'm walking in between them. And I'm from Alabama. We grew up with guns. That if a white guy wants to shoot me, fine. I'm not going to be the only person going down. So that we live with that kind of culture. So so the short of it, they didn't faze me. So I went to the back. I come up through the stairwell, and I walk into this room, and this little guy's with his back to me, and then he turns around. There's two guys in the room, he and his buddy. He turns around, he looks at me, and he says, "Oh, they sent you." And then he tells his friend, he turns to his friend, he said, "Well, this will never run." So then I begin to do what I do. I instruct him for my picture and I leave. And the picture ran. But you know, it was an insulting and intimidating at the same time. But I said, you know, okay, if I gotta die, I'm not the only one that's gonna die today. So let's get this job done.
Mr. Jesus.
Marie?
Oh, I have definitely a couple of stories. So one was, I was doing a story about how some neighbors were freaking out about Latinos moving into their neighborhood. And, you know, I approach the neighbor that has been making all of these complaints. She has a Confederate flag on front, so I'm already a little nervous there. And, you know, she starts rambling about like, you must be Italian because the Chronicle wouldn't send a Hispanic to like cover this story. Like this is like, insistent, you're Italian, right? You're Italian. And I'm like, I'm Puerto Rican. Like this, and it was just like, she was petrified. I was petrified. It was like the most awkward moment of my life. There was another time in New York, in Rochester, in the outskirts of the city, on which the person was like, "Oh, you have an accent. Where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, sir, I am Puerto Rican, born and raised." And he started rambling. "Puerto Ricans, every single neighborhood you guys enter, you just ruin it. You guys don't want to work. You guys are lazy. You guys are dirty." And I am here. And I said, "Sir, I have no idea what you're talking about." The only thing my parents did was work. Everything that my neighbors did was work and be productive. It's just one after the other. And it's always like, it starts with the accent. So obviously has taken me years to try to get over that. People here in the States have a thing with accents. It just made me extra aware of something that it was in the past was not a thing for me. Now I'm extra aware that accents will bring me trouble.
Oh, Monica.
Well, I haven't been working for that long, but at my first job in Florida, I ran into complications, and because people just assume that I am whatever they think I am, not Black. And so then when I tell them that I am Black, it can get really awkward really fast, because occasionally people act disappointed when I say that I'm Black and not Latino or Afghani or Afghan, literally anything else. And people have even said bad things about Black people as, you know, a monolith in front of me. And then I say, "Oh, well, actually, I am Black," and try to move on from there.
Well, you could be anything, and that's a cool thing. It might get you access. Carl Jus.
Yes, well, before cell phones, we had walkie-talkies and beepers. So my habit would be to call in from the office saying, "Hey, my name is Carl Jus. I'll be coming to your residence. You know, mostly do portraits or to cover a story, and I'm the photographer." And they'd be very, very polite. And this happened multiple times. Extremely polite. "Oh, can't wait to see you. Oh my God." So I would go knock on the door, ring the bell, and they would open the door and they would just stare at me. And I was there, "I'm Carl Jus, the Miami Herald." And they would go, "Wait a minute." And I could see them close the door and then go to their phone and call the Herald to verify that it was me at their door, because they couldn't believe that I was Black. And it happened enough times where I kind of flipped the script. So when they come back, they would say, "Oh, please come excuse me." They would make an excuse. And I would say, it's a pleasure meeting you for the first time, but I hope this won't be the last. And I left it at that.
Young Juan.
Well,
When I first went to Berendo Middle School in Los Angeles in 1977, I heard more Spanish than English at school. And I didn't think I was going to learn American English going to that school. So I called the LA Unified School District, asked them, can you transfer me to a school where I learn better English than what I'm getting now? And they say, oh, we have a permit with transportation program for inner city minorities to go to school in the Valley. And it took me a year to get on that program. And I realized that unless you speak the language of the decision makers, you're not going to get any opportunity. And that's how I began my American journey. And when I was working at the LA Times, I would go to places and people would just tell me, oh, you speak pretty good English. And I just turn around and tell them, you too.
Well, you're still fluent in Spanish though, aren't you?
Yeah, Spanish. And then when they start talking to me in whatever Mandarin they know, I talk back in Mandarin.
Yes, of course.
Hey, Fred, can I give one little racial incident from my past?
Why not? As long as it doesn't involve Don Hogan Charles.
It does not involve. Leave my good buddy alone. Now, I started at the Dayton Daily News, and of course, I didn't know the town, and I worked the phones, and I was doing a piece, and I was talking to a Catholic priest, and I interviewed him by phone, and finally I asked him, Father, where is the church located? He said, Faith and Vigora, man, with a name like Delaney, you don't know where the church is? I said, Father, I'm Black Irish. Fortunately,
Well,
I never met the father. I never met the father. He never knew the
Richard
difference.
is back at host. I won't tell you my one insulting story, but it's a fun one. If Richard, if I have permission, I have a story.
Go ahead.
I know this is Rock and Tour Day when you have photographers on. We're all characters. So here's the deal. I went to an assignment on embassy when I was working at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. They had the equivalent of the style page. Back then, they were called the women's page and the style page. Yeah. And I'm dating myself, I know, but it's true.
That's okay.
So my sister was assigned as the reporter, and she arrived before me and was told as soon as they answered the door, she was there, notebook in hand, and they said, just go around the back. The caterers, with the catering staff. So she said, okay. So she went around the back and I came and they answered the door and they said, just go around the back. I did. I went around the back, met my sister, and we stayed there. And until someone said they had called the paper. They called back and they said, there are two people named Sweets there. One is the reporter, one is the photographer. And they said, well, they haven't knocked on our door yet. And so somebody came out the back and said, anybody named Sweets here? We were there, but we didn't say a word. We just went around the back, stayed with the staff and waited until they realized they'd made an embarrassing mistake. But it happens that there are countless stories, but mentally it takes you down at the end of the day. I bet for all of you, when folks can't figure out who's what, and they are usually who we cover are part of the 1% or have the white privilege. So happens, we deal with it, and here we go. Richard, you're the host. I'm glad you're back.
Yeah,
So am I.
I didn't get to answer.
Well, Sharon has her hand up.
I didn't get to
Eugene didn't answer.
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tapahe. I'm sorry. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
So
See there? I'm guilty.
That's okay.
That's
Sharon,
all
did you
right,
have a
Fred.
question or not?
We'll forgive
yeah,
you.
I want to share.
Oh, no,
I wanna
okay, all
share
right.
my reply about the insult, or what, you know, really wasn't an insult, but it did feel like one. But back in late 90s, I was working at ESPN the magazine, and they hired me, and I realized I was the first Native American to work in their establishment. And this was during the time when the Washington football team was their name was being sued at the time. But I was at the magazine, and I was there, just barely there, like a week. And I got introduced to the staff. And when I got introduced to the staff, I let them know I'm Native American and I'm Navajo and from the reservation. But later on, as I was mingling with the staff, one of the staff members actually asked me. He said to me, and he wasn't trying to be mean to me, but it just gives you an idea what happened is that he asked me, and asked me if I still lived in a teepee.
Oh no, no,
And
he didn't.
And I had two choices at the time, and I could have got angry and got upset and mad, but I realized he wasn't trying to be mean. I realized that he probably was only taught in his schools about the Plains Indians. So I sat down with him and I told him I'm Navajo, and we don't, our tribe does not live in teepees. And it became a great friendship after that. But there's a lot of times, even with people of color, they still are able to hurt people. And I think that's the part that I believe a lot of education is still needed in the world about how, and also how Native Americans, like I'm Navajo, and how I don't represent every single Native American in America. And I can't speak for all of them. And I think that's the part that's really tough on Native Americans as journalists, is that sometimes our words are taken out of context, and they think that because I believe one thing, that all of a sudden, a Cherokee or, a Crow Indian, they all believe the same thing that I believe in, and it's not true. And so I think a lot of times that's what happens in the journalism world, is that, as Native people, all of a sudden we're subhuman, and, and it's really easy as a journalist to be thrown in jail as a Native American. You tell them you're a journalist, you tell them everything, you show them your credentials, but they don't care. They'll just throw you in jail, and I think that's the part that's different between minorities, is that, the Black Association and all that, it seems to have more power because you have more people. But when it comes to Native Americans in the journalism field, we get treated a lot worse than a lot of other journalists, just because that even in America, the history of America makes us feel like, like we are still not part of society.
Eugene, is that
making
true
that a
just
teachable
universally,
moment.
or are there certain parts of the United States where that's more prone to happen?
It's universal. It's universal. It's in the East Coast, it's even probably even worse, just because there's a lot less natives there. And so there's a lot of uneducated people about Native people. As you get closer to the reservations, it becomes more hatred because of border towns and because of the relationship between non-natives and natives. So, when you get further away from the reservation, it's more uneducated and naive people. But when you get closer to reservations, it's more hatred and more focused on, oh, okay, we don't want them to prosper, so this is how we're going to treat them.
Even the photographers, or maybe especially the photographers.
Yeah, especially as photographers, because we can capture the moment, either video or camera. And a lot of times, a lot of the photographers that I have associated with, they get, it's like they look for you, you know, they look for you, because if you're a writer, you can write and not be seen, you know, you can be there to witness it and be there. But as a photographer, you're standing there with a camera or a video camera or whatever you're doing, and they can focus on you and pull you out of the crowd. And even with your credentials of showing, it still happens. That's what happened in Standing Rock a lot when we were, you know, when we were on the front lines, a lot of the photojournalists there.
Dwight Ellis has his hand up. Unmute, Dwight, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Last time I was here. I wanted to ask a question. You know, some years ago or decades ago, it was considered to be a privilege or something special for African Americans to speak of their Native American blood. I wondered, I've not met, is it Tapa? What? Yeah, the guy just, pardon? What is his name? Tapati. Yes. Hi, I really appreciated what you were sharing. In your travels and dealing with African Americans, have you had many conversations or mentions about where African American journalists, African Americans in general, talked about their Native American blood? Yes. He's muted.
He didn't hear you.
Oh, you didn't hear me? Wow.
Mr. Tapahe, we have a question on the floor for you.
Can you hear me? Oh,
no.
All right. Can you hear me now?
No, you can't hear you.
Okay, we'll have to come back to that one then. Nichelle and Sarah Glover both had their hands up. Nichelle and then Sarah.
My question is based on what I saw our photographers at USA Today deal with when they were covering the George Floyd trial, and then before that there was Alton Sterling and Michael Brown, just situations like that when the photographer has to be immersed all day, every day in that sort of tense racial situation and be Black, and in this case be Black and male. I just wonder if the photographers had perspective on just how to keep yourself mentally together. Sometimes the photographers, as with other people in the room, are in situations where they may be the only Black person on staff. And then you're in this situation where you're watching George Floyd have a knee on his neck day after day after day, and just kind of immersed in that. So if you could talk to just the mental trauma of it and just keeping yourself sane in that environment.
Don't everyone answer it first at once. We've got Jared Henderson.
I'm asking for some
call.
friends.
Jared Henderson was actually in Minneapolis. I don't know how many of the other photographers on the call, but he might speak to his experience because he was there during the whole saga.
Well, that's why I was asking in support of him, actually.
Well.
Yeah, I'm here for it. Hey, everyone. No, I'm interested in everyone's answers as well, just because having gone through that experience, and trying to also observe all the rules and regulations that our organizations put on us about social media presence and what we can and cannot say online. Sometimes there's not an outlet, right? And so there's been a few times this year where I've tried to step away from the journalism and in the daily grind of news, but I literally went from that project to a project about the blue wall of silence and dealing with police whistleblowing and the effects on that. And so last year wasn't a time to kind of break, but I'm curious from our panelists, how have you been intentional about stepping away, especially in the legacy of our work, and as journalists, kind of seems like a badge of honor sometimes to not step away and to take those bumps and bruises. But now when we're so conscious about mental health and balance and all those things, how have you been intentional in your career to be able to say, hey, I want to take a step back and just kind of photograph puppies for a while, or just something that allows you the mental break that you need to kind of like reset. Maybe it's a passion project like Mr. Higgins, or maybe it's, putting yourself in a position to just do a different type of work. So I'm curious what our panelists think. Thanks for asking, the show.
Well, for me, I covered a lot of the Black Lives Matter protesters in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and points in between in South Florida. And there's two things I try to do. One is to be aware that I'm not invisible. The second thing is to seek out gatekeepers. Because if you have a relationship with people, they're less likely to see you as another and push you out. I remember covering a demonstration up in Fort Lauderdale, and I got in the middle of shooting video, shooting stills, and a cop had actually pushed a protester, female protester, and I caught the action, and a black cop came over and told the white cop to calm down, and they got into a scuffle, and they pulled the white cop out of the situation because the crowd was getting really, really unruly, and all of a sudden all hell broke through. And in terms of dealing with your own sense of trauma, the collective trauma that we all were feeling in 2020, I decided personally to apply for a ULITE grant, which I won, to do an exhibition called Defiance. And the project looks at visually the defiance on all sides. The defiance of the system to understand what justice really looked like. Defiance in the terms of, social justice and stakeholders who are refusing to be pulled back. And defiance in terms of those who choose to remain silent. And I think it's really important that as a journalist, but more important, not just as a Black journalist, but as someone who's trying to find some sense of truth, that sometimes you have to go into the belly of the beast. And mustering the courage, because there was not a foot on my neck for 8+ minutes. But it's been 40 years of collective trauma that I have to deal with between those times of Floyd, and you can name the next person that may happen, that may be a victim of police brutality or an unjust system. And so that's how I tend to approach it.
Okay, thanks. Sarah Glover had a question. Welcome. She just got in from the airport.
Good day. I hope you can hear me. I'm still at the airport.
Oh,
I had to.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. I had to scoot to get somewhere where I could pull this up and hold it up. So I just wanted to say hello and just so much gratitude for so many people on this call. I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to tell you a story about our Chester Higgins Jr.
All right.
I wanted to share that about 30 years ago when I was a student at Syracuse, and this was well before the internet, and I had an assignment to pick a photographer anywhere in the world and reach out to that person, try to get to know that person and talk about their craft and their craftsmanship. That I wrote Chester a letter to the New York Times, and he responded. And I was just elated. I was just elated and grateful that he even acknowledged me. And one of the assignment editors, I think, actually reached out to me first. And then I got to talk with Chester, and I got to spend a day with him. So I took the bus down from Syracuse to New York City and spent the day with Chester. And he introduced me to Ethiopian food. That was the first time I ever had Ethiopian food in Brooklyn. And then we went on an assignment, and I photographed him throughout the day. And then when I came back to school to my class presentation, I created these little cards with Chester's portrait and a quote from him that he shared with me that day. And I just wanted to say, Chester, what a tremendous impact you had on me, and your graciousness and gratitude I will never forget. I actually found some of those cards. I made more than I needed in the class, so I'm gonna maybe send you one of them because I laminated them, and it was a color printout. You know, at the time the photo printer wasn't that great, but it was something that I just wanted to say that you know, there's so many people on this call today that have had an impact on me. And, you know, to see you, Bob Black, good day. One of our other panelists, one of our other panelists who just spoke, Carl Joost, also had a tremendous impact on me. I was an intern at the Miami Herald, and he took me around Miami and also had something to do with me coming through. Him and Dudley dragged me to Cuba, among many of you. The Visual Task Force members, so many of you on the call today, when I got involved as a student 30 years ago, or right when this was kicking off in the early 90s, it was basically all guys running running the task force, the Brian Monroes, the Fred Sweets, you know, so many of you on this call. And I just wanted to say, your impact continues. I have tried to be the example and be an impact to others because of what you poured into me and how you shaped and molded me. I also wanted to say that I am a photojournalist, I'm a visual journalist, and I'd actually prefer to be on the street, and I probably will be again one day. But in the meantime, between time, I also recognize the value and need for more of us to be in managerial roles. I see Denise Kenyon on the call and others who have served us in a managerial role. And for me right now, while my title does not have visual in that management role, I am leading up a newsroom. And so I have the capacity to have a broader impact and hire people and give people the space and the place to do this work. So it's an honor and a privilege. I'm going to get back to the street one of these days, but in the meantime, between time, I'm happy to make that impact. And right now, I just touched back down in Minneapolis, and it has been a task for certain. I started at NPR News the day of the Chauvin verdict being announced last April, and it has been relentless between Dante Wright, just recently Amir Locke. These stories must be told with authenticity, with purpose and power, and the work does not end, does not stop. So wanted to lastly say, I am a champion of others, and I will be your biggest cheerleader. The words of, I believe, Eugene, and I apologize, that came in when I believe he was speaking about the experiences of Indigenous people. I just hired my first Indigenous reporter last month, Matthew Holding Eagle III. And I wrote him a note last week and I said, I will be your biggest cheerleader. My Asian brothers and sisters, my Black brothers and sisters, my Indigenous brothers and sisters, my Latino brothers and sisters, my white brothers and sisters, I will be everybody's biggest cheerleader. And so, you know, I do that because of what you all have poured into me. And we will, last year we had some visual positions. We actually tabled them. We'll be reposting them in the next week. If anyone's interested, we'll have two visual journalist roles at NPR News, Minnesota Public Radio. We obviously produce across platforms, podcasts, internet, everything. So while we're not a newspaper, we do the same in-depth reporting and work, and we have such a big impact as the second largest public media company in the country outside of NPR. And so I'll do what I can while I'm here. The story and the tales and the trials and tribulations and the challenges, and quite frankly, the really, quite frankly, beautiful struggle of Black men able to tell this story in a unique way. We're about to launch in March a 5-month project called North Star Journey. And that's going to be about telling the positive stories of diverse communities around the state of Minnesota. And we'll have some unique stories that will come out of that. And I'm sure you'll see it or pick up with seeing that. But really, again, today to herald you all, to congratulate Chester on his book, The Sacred Mile. I have my copy, so I hope to connect with you when I'm back in New York and I can get it signed. I wish you all the best and thank you for what you've done for me. And if there's anything I can do for anybody on this call or within our networks, I do hope that you would let me know and reach out anytime. And I wish everyone a blessed day.
Thank you, Sarah. For those who don't know, Sarah is the immediate past president of NABJ and worked for NBC in New York before that. And before that, as a photojournalist in Philadelphia at the Daily News and Inquirer. She touched on something about the leadership in the newsroom and the mobility of photojournalists. Yeah, I see you, Jason. Mobility of photojournalists and how diverse the ranks are of photojournalists in mainstream news organizations. So we want to talk about that as soon as Jason asks.
Jason Nicolò Johnson.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Good to see Bob Black, Chester Higgins. I just want to announce that, or remind us that this year is the 30th anniversary of the historic book Songs of My People, in which Gordon Parks wrote the introduction to. Many of us met working on that project. And it's also the 20th anniversary of the most historic day in the history of professional Black photographers in America. That was the celebration for Gordon Parks' 90th birthday tribute, in which we had 90 photographers together in Harlem for a historic group photo and later dinner that night. So we're celebrating 2 milestones this year. And of course, Dwight Ellis was there to interview Gordon at the dinner for the 90th birthday tribute. So it's good to see Dwight on the call. And what I'm doing down here in Savannah is trying to train the next generation of young people to go out and cover these events. The historic trial of Ahmaud Arbery has been in the news, and during the 100 Pastors Rally, we took 16 of our journalism students to cover that rally, and it was a game changer. It was life changing, but it's right in our backyard. There was no reason not to cover it 70 miles away. So I advise, or I recommend to everyone, when you have news events in your backyard, try to take some young photographers with you. And that's it for me. Thanks, Richard.
All right, thank you, Jason. Now, my other question, let's get to that specifically about what about the issue of diversity among photojournalists and mobility into the newsroom? What can we say about that? Is everything wonderful?
No.
Can I add to that question, Richard?
Yes, please.
I'm currently the executive director of the National Press Photographers Association. We're co-hosting this, and Sarah spoke to this about leadership and having more of us in the leadership position. And I want to ask all of you how so many of us are brought into our position for diversity hire. Do you feel that your role as a person of color, taking in your culture and your experience, is being utilized to tell stories that are not normally told by our non-photographers of color, that stories that are missed? Or have you felt that you've been a token representation and not used to your ultimate ability to contribute to stories and the relationships of leadership in your role in development? And again, many of these photographers I've worked with since they were young folks coming into the industry, and then the legends like Bob and Chester, you guys have been inspirations, but I'd like to see how this new generation, and Carl, you've been there from the beginning, from a long time too. How have you felt working in mainstream institutions have worked for you?
Well, I don't think you could win every fight. I think when you, well, I'm one of the last Black photographers in my newsroom. Monica Richardson, which is our new executive manager, first Black female. She's making enormous strides to get more equity within the newsroom, hiring a lot of young Black writers. Hopefully we can hire a young woman of color, photographer. But it's a beautiful struggle. It is a struggle. It is a struggle because what's the value of having having the honor to speak on any specific topic if you don't have an audience that's going to listen. And this is something I find myself constantly engaging with management, and sometimes I win, sometimes I don't, but every day I do. And we did a wonderful story on Lincoln Memorial Park about a segregated cemetery which was falling apart and where people could not find their loved ones because it was overrun by vegetation and shrubs, and all sorts of shenanigans was happening within that memorial park. And I remember being in a meeting and say, well, I think we should get Leonard Pitts to do the narration for the video. And an editor say, well, I don't know about that. I said, well, I do. And I called Leonard Pitts 10 minutes and said, Leonard, I need a fade, brother. And if you get a chance, please look it up. It's called Caretakers. It's on YouTube. It's also behind our paywall, so I advise y'all to go on YouTube and see it. But we have to honor those in which shoulders we rest, right? And as tough as it might be now, being the only Black visual storyteller, I know I have to honor Chester, Sweets, Black, and many more who paved the way. So I'm still opening doors, and sometimes it doesn't happen in the newsroom. Sometimes we bring, like Jason says, I bring young photographers of color with me. Vanessa Charlot, which I mentored. I have Wilson Delafort, who are doing amazing work. And I'm looking forward to continue that legacy and honoring all our Black pioneers and journalists of color.
Okay. Is Denise here from Philadelphia? Yeah, I heard your name mentioned.
I am here. Hi.
Oh, good. Well, good. Yeah, tell us about what that project that you all started in Philadelphia at the Inquirer, which could be an example of what happens when you have African-American photographers in some leadership roles.
Yeah, we did a project called Wildest Dreams. I have a team of photojournalists and videographers, and one of my videographers, Rashad, came to me after the city had been burning for 3 or 4 days, and he's like, I'm tired of doing all this performative Black stuff for the paper. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. What can we do? Because at the time it was, a lot of things that are normal for us, having the conversation with our children about the police, all these kind of things. Now the paper wanted to do those things. Well, it's not foreign to us. This is the life we live. So he was exhausted with having to do videos on this stuff. And I said, so let's do something. And so we started thinking about legacy and imagery. And, at that particular time, George Floyd's video was everywhere. The photographs were everywhere. And the photographers were being attacked. I had my staff attacked. They were getting burned, like their equipment was getting smashed. It was chaos. And we wanted something that we could work on that would actually express us as a people, us as, where we are right now and where we're going. What are the things that we bring to the table already? And some of those things were like art, some of them were music, legacy, our history. So we devised a plan. And so, there was not a whole lot of permission asking. We just dove in. And because it's my department, I was given some freedom in that way. And I will say that my bosses at the time, Patrick Kirkstra, I told him, I said, I want to do this thing. He was like, go for it. So we did this thing and it lasted for about a year. And it wasn't sponsored. It wasn't, there wasn't a lot of money thrown at it. We spent a lot of money, but there wasn't a sponsor. But we did work that we wanted to talk to Black Philadelphians We wanted to have a conversation. And it was a beautiful experience to have these real conversations with journalists of color and be supported by the whole the whole newsroom, because at a certain point we had to go public with this is our plan, right? So for a while we planned this thing with a lot of meetings behind closed doors and a lot of locked Zoom rooms. And then we had a plan to unveil to the newsroom, and we started to get the support of the online team and marketing and advertising. And so that was really hopeful. But I will say it was exhausting. It put the journalists through a lot, because that was a lot of digging. It was a lot of soul searching for them. It was a lot of questions about their identity and the legacy they want to leave, and the conversations they wanted to have with Black Philadelphians in particular. And what does Black mean? There's Afro-Cuban, there is all kinds of things that are Black. And so what does that mean when you're doing a project about Black people and Black Philadelphians specifically? And so it was exhausting for them. And it, at a certain point, you're, as a manager, you're running defense, right? You don't want anyone on this project to get hurt. You don't want anybody, you want the messages to be clear. But it was a beautiful experience. And it was well received. We weren't sure how it was going to be received, but it was well received. And I think the journalists ultimately enjoyed it. But I enjoyed being a part of it. And so I'm grateful that no one squashed the project, because we've all been there when we put in all this work and effort and somebody says no. But they gave us the space and room to have this conversation, and it was nice.
It was all worth it then.
It was worth it. I mean, you have to ask Monica, she was on the project, but from the feedback that I'm getting from the journalists, they enjoyed it. But it was difficult when you're asking 25-year-olds or 22-year-olds or even 30-year-olds about their identity. Who are you, right? My identity is based in my family, right? I'm raised by parents who are from the Civil Rights South. They are 72 and 73. They have seen some things. So my identity is based in my family and my experiences. But when you're asking a new generation of journalists, who are you? Who are you? That is some difficult work. So it wasn't all 22-year-olds, right? We also had some veteran journalists in that number as well. So the blend, I mean, it was just a beautiful space to create in, which we don't often get afforded. And the project that I worked on specifically was Black Joy. I was tired of seeing Black men lynched. I was exhausted by seeing Black men get shot in the head. And, George Floyd was a powerful movement, but where was everybody for Tamir Rice? This has been happening. Like, this isn't new. And I was fatigued with imagery of Black men specifically being murdered in front of us. So it was very much an evidence, we are being inundated by this evidence-based imagery of Black trauma, right? And so what does that cause you to do as a Black woman? It calls you to call your Black father, Daddy, be safe. It calls you to call your Black brother, who is a big man, hey, be safe. It's exhausting as a Black woman to watch and to experience, so the project was something that I looked forward to doing, although I did have to reassure the group, like, hey, this is new territory. It's not going to be easy. Not everybody's going to get it. Not everybody's going to understand. And that's okay. So if it's messy, let it be messy. Let us just get through the process and get a beautiful piece of work out. So I think it was worth it.
All right. Michelle Johnson had her hand up.
Yes, I did. Hello, everybody.
All right, welcome. This is the first time.
Yes, it's my first roundtable. Yeah. Denise just said something that actually is a question for Monica about younger people, younger photographers. And she asked, who are you? So that's my question to you. Who are you? And what do you feel like younger journalists are bringing to the table right now?
That's a very good
I'll
question.
put you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot. I know. I know.
I feel like I'm still figuring that out. I've been working for almost 8 years, but it still feels like I am super young and new, compared to all of the wealth of experience here in this room. So, I have conversations with my father and with a number of people on this call often, that like trying to dive into those things, but I don't think I've really figured it out. I think that young journalists look at the world a lot different than more veteran journalists. Like we talked about mental health and that kind of issue. I'm more likely to say, hey, I'm not going to do that to Denise, and she will respond as she responds. But sometimes I know that I have to look out for my own mental well-being more than the work, and that question has arisen a lot too. Like, well, what's more important? Is it the work, or is it you being healthy and happy? And people fall on the whole spectrum of how they feel, but I tend to lean more towards staying healthy.
Okay. I see Jim Estrin is here and Brent Lewis from the New York Times, and they work on that pipeline issue. So I want to ask them, how is that going? What about the pipeline of getting photographers of color into newsrooms? Either one of you.
Well, we, Brent does Diversify, which is so brilliant and is so instrumental in that. But I've worked on that through Lens, through the New York Portfolio Review, which I think you may have been to, Monica, were you? Yeah. And where, we look for... you can do that in Assistant. I'm sorry, what?
That must have been a stray.
Oh, okay.
Remark.
Where every year for 10 years now, we've had over 50% photographers of color. I think Denise and Akili have been there as well. Just trying to be super intentional in who, Brent came to the first one as a photographer, which you can talk about, Brent. But I think it's just a matter of being super intentional, right, in who you mentor, in how you affect the world, in believing in the importance of how people are represented and the roles of inclusion in that. And in a broad sense, not just race and ethnicity, but class and other issues as well. Brent?
Yeah, so once again, much like Jim was saying, like it really, for me, with the creation of Diversify has always just kind of, if you don't know what it is, it's a database of, oh my God, we're at 1,000 members, 1,000 photographers of color from across the world, with another 400 up next who are really amazing photographers who are not quite there at membership level, but they're going to be making fire in the next years or 2 years. So you need to watch them, because for me, I'm always like, these are the folks I'm probably going to want to working for at some point. But it has, my role at the New York Times is, and honestly, the reason why Diversify got started, because I want to know who was out there. I know when I was an up-and-coming photographer, I'm looking at the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, whoever, and they're like flying photographers into my city. I'm born and raised from Chicago. I can't believe I got literally 30 seconds into this and didn't say that. Usually that's the first thing I say. And I just knew I wasn't on folks' radars. And even when I went to the New York Portfolio Review, like still, like many people left that and then like met with editors and places. I knew no one at the New York Times. I knew no one at these places outside of Jim. In like Todd Heisler, but I knew there was a way to get in. So when I flipped over and left the world of being a photographer and came to a role of an editor, I wanted to open that door. I had the ability. The whole idea of the gatekeeper, I was now in that role. I can open that door. I can allow photographers to come in who I rock with, who I think are absolutely brilliant and phenomenal, and some of the most dedicated and driven photographers that others are missing. Because I was seeing, when I can go down a list of endless photographers right now that I would have hired. I would have called in a heartbeat. Would be my first call. They weren't getting that first call. They were like begging and knocking on the doors of the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, like, please just give me an opportunity, give me a chance. I'm good. So when I got to ESPN, which was first up, I wanted to know who was out there. And so with Creating Diversify, it was honestly, it was my top secret list of photographers that came out to being 50 and then just grew exponentially over the next 3 years with my co-founder Andrea Wise, and now we're at that 1,000 number. And these are photographers I look up to. Honestly, I'm geeked. I pick with Paul. I call Wayne Lawrence. I'm geeked. I'm excited. I call Anthony Peters. I'm excited. He's, I think, like, I want to say a month older than me. I look up to him like a big brother almost. Oh my God, Anthony, we're doing this amazing work. And so really and what I've been doing over the New York Times now is continuing that. So every time I've gone places, I've learned this over the years, like you bring people with you. So I've had some of my folks who are the three-peats who have worked on at least one assignment every place I've been. Some parties, I think Dee Delgado has worked for me at ESPN's worked for me at the Washington Post, has worked for me at the New York Times. And you just keep bringing folks along. And now that I have this door and I have this opportunity to reach 40 plus editors that make up the New York Times photo staff, I'm throwing names out to them, or we're in conversation. I'm looking for someone in Dallas. Oh, have you heard of Deshaun Gillette? Or I'm looking for someone in Chicago. Oh, Sebastian Hidalgo. And just throwing these names out, getting people into the system. We have Slack channels I'm going through. So it's really just keeping Diversify rolling on that way and just making sure that the people that I know that I want to get out, I'm just sneaking them into the conversations wherever I can possibly fit them and getting their work seen, because their work.
Brent, but also, beyond the list, there's so much mentoring within the organization of Diversify, and the Facebook group and the support system that's so profound that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
Because that was also, you look for, not just individual mentorship, but mentors, from established people, but the community among peers, right?
Exactly. Yeah, no, that collective experience is amazing. What our Facebook group and the community that we've been able to build over the last 4 years has been amazing. And you're getting younger photographers, getting not even hardcore like one-on-one mentorship, but collective community efforts to be like, okay, this is what you need to do. Oh, I have this story I want to work on. How do I go about it? This is how you can do that. Or I have this, or who should I reach out to about this? Or where should I find gear from her? I didn't get that invoice paid from XYZ editor. How do I go about that? And it's just really that community, that feel that it's a hug, honestly, of just this community where you don't feel like you're alone. You're not in this boat by yourself trying to row. You have a whole team. You guys look like going to the Olympics. And so I think it's just beautiful. And I feel like that is what we need. And that's what I know I needed at that time. So if anything that's being done now that I'm a part of, it's something I wish I had, 10 years ago. Ooh. Sorry.
Okay.
Though you did have Denise and you did have Akili and all the other people here.
Yeah, by all means. But I'm just saying, like, like the 10 just got me. But like, once again, like, it's something special to that community. And once again, I can also just go down the list really quickly, like you just started, Jim, Denise, Keely, Bob, who only some people I can like cry over in person. Fred, like I can go down the list of folks who just been inspirational to me. And so everything I'm doing now is built off of that. It's built off that community. It's built off that collective. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I wanted to keep uplifting the next generation. So one day I'll be sitting in this Zoom meeting and they're like, oh yeah, Brent did this for me. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. Yeah. So
okay, let me get back to the panelists. I wanted to get to the whole issue of representation before we close here. It was about 20 years ago that NABJ, I was chair of the Media Monitoring Committee then, brought in a professor named Martin Gillens, who did a study of who is portrayed as welfare recipients. And it was disproportionately Black, even though most welfare recipients are white. And I've written about in Rapid City, South Carolina, how they would bring out the Native Americans in the perp walk. And that was the image that a lot of people saw. of Native Americans. And there have been, countless examples of there's a lot of news organizations now have revised their policy on mugshots, that they're not going to use them as they once did, because that was presenting a disproportionate image of African Americans. So this speaks to the issue of who makes the decisions on what gets on the air and the photographs used in the newspaper or magazine. And I just wanted to ask the panelists if they have any thoughts about that. I'll say one last thing, and that is, I discovered Frederick Douglass is one of our heroes. That there's a whole book of pictures of Frederick Douglass, and he wanted to be photographed as much as possible. I think he was the most photographed person of the 19th century because he understood the power of photographs, and he wanted Black people to be photographed looking respectable and not, raggedy. And so he volunteered, and he wanted to change that image. So my question to the panelists is, what do you have to say about that? And are you satisfied with the representation?
Well, I don't know if I'm considered a panelist, but I'd like to say something.
Okay, please do.
I think that fundamentally, we are at these white organizations, media organizations, one, to be competent and to be professional. We owe them that. But we also owe our own community. We have to be there to make sure that the issues, that our issues are exposed, and that they're exposed in the most dignified way. And we have to run interference against people. Not all people are racist, but whenever you run into them, you have to try to deal with them. And a newspaper is made up of many different people. I only had one situation that I think that really speaks to the need and the presence of being on the inside. Many of you may remember there was an ambassador to the United Nations named Andrew Young.
Oh, yes.
And Andrew Young was being fired because he had an illegal meeting with the Palestinians. And what came across the wire, we had many different pictures of him, but one picture that came across the wire is a photographer who made a picture of him in the back of his seat of the car at night, leaving the White House. He looked like he was an escaping something. And this particular editor, this young white editor, I went out because I was on a night shift and I saw this as on the board to go into the paper. And I said, well, why are we using this picture? He says, that's the picture. Very macho, very, ignore me. So I just took the picture and I went to the managing editor's office, Abe Rosenthal, and asked his secretary, could I see him for a minute? And I took the picture to him because Rosenthal had worked in a foreign bureau. He had worked in Asia. So he had, even whatever else he may have, I had to have the faith that he may have, be able to understand what I was about to say to him. But you take these chances. And I said to him, I says, look, this is what's just happened. We don't treat any other ambassador this way, because what that picture did essentially is nullified him. I didn't say we don't treat Black people this way. We don't treat ambassadors this way. And we should not entreat our ambassador that way. So he looked at the picture. He walks me back out to the desk. He said, let me see what other pictures are available. He looks at the other pictures. He picks a picture that is respectful of the situation. And he told this editor, this night editor, use this picture. The night editor looks at me. Fuck him at that point, because I'd already made my picture. So, and I say, I'd much rather be on the inside to fight those kind of issues before they get printed, before they run in the television, than be on the outside the next day with a placard. So we have to think about what our value, we are strategically placing ourselves, and there are strategic responsibilities we have, not only to the employer, but to the community that they represent, that they would not even know about issues if we were not there to put those on the table.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good.
Very good, Chester.
Somebody else had something to say? Okay.
No.
All right. We have, it's time for us to introduce ourselves. before it gets to be too late. So I want to just call on people who we don't know who they are already. So Akili, we know who you are. Jason, we know who you are. Who's Johnny's iPhone? I'm not sure who that is. Okay. Fred Sweets, we know who you are, Fred. Paul Delaney, you've spoken already. We know you. We know our guest panelist, Bob Black. I want to just give a special shout out.
Thank you, Richard.
We haven't seen Bob in quite a while. NABJ Hall of Famer, pioneer in Chicago. And Nichelle Smith, have you identified yourself yet? All right, we know. Go ahead. You're muted.
I have not. I'm unmuted now. Enterprise Editor for Racism and History at USA Today, and colleague of Jared Henderson. Do check out our new Black History Month special edition called Black Progress, and my ongoing project called Never Been Told: The Lost History of People of Color.
All right, E.R. Ship. I don't think you've
Hey there,
said
everybody.
anything yet.
I'm Ship. I have worked at the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Daily News in the past. And now I'm teaching at Morgan State University. And right now I'm wrestling with my cat, Sammy Davis Jr.
Sammy Davis Jr. Okay, Denise, we know who you are. Carl, we know. Eugene. Jim Espin, I don't think you formally said who you are. You're unmute, please.
Sorry, I'm a staff photographer at the New York Times for 30 years now. So a colleague of Chester's for many years and of Brent's. I started the Lens blog, which for 10 years wrote about photography, but wrote a lot about representation and race as well. I write as well as photograph for the Times.
Very good, very good. Okay, we know Chester. Ken Walker.
Yeah, I was having Wi-Fi issues, so I missed most of this, but be assured I'm going to look at the recording later because it's such a fascinating topic and you have fascinating representatives of the issue, all of the living giants. You got Chester, you got Fred, you got just so many people. But for those who don't know, my brief history is I started off at the Washington Star, went from there to ABC News and wound up as the Africa Bureau Chief at National Public Radio. And now I'm doing my memoir.
All right. Brent, I think you've said who you are, but tell us again briefly. Brent Lewis.
All right, so my name is Brent Lewis. I am a photo editor on the homepage and express desk of the New York Times. I began my journey back in Chicago, born and raised, freelance for the Chicago Tribune, intern for the Chicago Tribune, took a bunch of random newspaper jobs on the way up, last as staff photographer at the Denver Post, and then switched over to ESPN's The Undefeated as a photo editor.
Okay, short, brief.
Oh, sorry. I've had a long career. And now that's why now I'm at the
All right, George Tolbert. George, are you there? Unmute, please.
I'm still here.
Okay,
my name is George Tolbert. I am a retired official U.S. Senate photographer. I was the first Black photographer there and the last.
And the last? Wow.
Yes, they hired a mostly women and a Hispanic woman to replace me.
Interesting. And of course, you've taken pictures of our roundtables, for which we are eternally grateful. Thank you. Monica, we know who you are. Rebecca Aguilar.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Aguilar. Thanks again, Richard. Inspiring. All these photojournalists. Man, I'm inspired, and I've been on Amazon ordering books, by the way.
Oh my God.
I have been a reporter. I've been a reporter 40 years, 28 years in television news from Toledo, Ohio to Los Angeles. I'm in Dallas. I'm a freelancer. Thank God I'm a freelancer right now because I am the president of the Society of Professional Journalists. Always proud to say I'm the first Latina and woman of color to lead this organization in 112 years. So we can do it. Thank you so much.
All right. Roger Witherspoon. Roger, unmute, please.
Hi, everybody. I
have worked in radio, TV, and print over the last 60 years. And now I'm semi-retired. I was the first Black editorial writer in Texas when I joined the Dallas Times Herald. And in this neck of the woods was the first State House reporter east of the Mississippi. And I had a desk in the basement because the governor didn't want me on the main floor.
Okay, Roger, thank you. Brief. Regina Boone. The Black press is represented. Black press is in the house.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Regina Boone. I am a staff photographer here in Richmond, Virginia at the Richmond Free Press, the newspaper that my father, Raymond Boone, and my mother, Jean Boone, started 30 years ago this year. And prior to that, I was at the Detroit Free Press for 14 years, where Jared and I were on staff together. So yeah, that's who I am.
Okay.
And
is there anything particular about the Black press that should have been in this discussion?
oh, that's a whole nother.
We just write something in the chat then if you are so moved about
Okay, thank you.
Right. Claire Regan.
Oh, hi from New York City. I'm Claire Regan, longtime print managing editor and journalism professor, and proud president-elect of the Society of Professional Journalists. Thank you for
All right,
inviting me
thank you.
today. Thank you.
Okay. Marie, did anything you wanted to add to what you said earlier?
Hello, everyone again. I wanted to mention how we need to really encourage the emerging journalists to really get in positions of leadership, to truly get involved. It terrifies me a bit that I might be the last, Puerto Rican president of NBPA for another 20 years, because we might not be really encouraging those voices to take other roles than storytellers. That's something that really terrifies me. I'm naturally a kind of a shy person, if it wasn't for people like Akili and Denise and many others who really took interest in the quiet girl, I might have missed so many opportunities to be able to do things that I always wanted to do for my own community, do things that I wanted to do for the community of color. So we really need to go the extra mile to type of pressure, put some pressure on some of the emerging journalists and really help them with skills, right? Like tools and strategies to be able to take it to the next level, public speaking, research, help them become like spreadsheet people, like what I call kind of like spreadsheet people. So that it's kind of what I want to focus this year. I want to be able to try to bring new, fresh blood into the organizations and to kind of pressure some, to join. It takes time to become a leader. Not all of us are born leaders. So a little bit of that encouragement, it's very, very important.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, did you have a very quick comment about that? Unmute, please.
One of the things I do want to point out is Marie de la Jesus. Marie is the first Latina president of NPPA, and that is huge. So let's all applaud her because that is a big deal. That's important. But coming off from what she said, I think that's important to all of us because I come here every time he has a roundtable. I don't miss it. There's other things I miss, and this is Sunday, there's other things. But what I do is I get inspired by all of you. And that's how I get empowered to be able to fight. Yes, there's racism in everything, including journalism organizations, right? So we go out there and fight. But I challenge all of you guys to, one, start your own groups. I have Latinas in journalism that has 2,500 Latinas on Facebook because I thought I am tired of people saying, I can't find an experienced Latina. Well, bullshit. I have the list. I'm here, right? For all you guys at the New York Times, by the way, there's a lot of photojournalists Latinas out there. Secondly, mentor. Look, I'm 63 years old, but I'm still mentoring a lot of people. It doesn't mean they have to call me every day. Sometimes it's maybe once a year. Hey, I'm looking at my contract. What should I do about this? So, let's continue because I think more than anything, whether we're people of color, and I see some white people here too, which is great. By the way, my husband's white, so here's the thing. Continue continue to be the voice for those other people. You know, continue saying, hey, I see leadership qualities in you right now. And Richard, again, I know I'm trying to shorten this, but this is so important. Right now, the Society of Professional Journalists is 9 board members. 6 of them are people of color. 5 of them are NHJ members. 1 of them is an NABJ member. Another one is a transgender. See how we create change? I knew 3 years ago when I was elected to that board, it's change. We have to make it. But I also knew to go and find people that had leadership qualities. I also, even the shy ones, that I know all you have to do is come on, just share it. You can do it. So that's my word of inspiration to all of you, because all of you inspire me. And this is why I come to these roundtables.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca. Corey Johnson, do you have anything to add? Unmute, please.
No, sir. Just glad to be here amongst the family. That's all.
All right. Great. I'm glad you're here. All right. Next, Sharon Farmer.
Oh, Sharon.
Unmute, please. Unmute.
Yes, sir. Power to the people. Don't give it up. Don't take no prisoners, because at this point, we're in trouble. You know that. All y'all. So I rest my case.
Okay, Sharon is our official photographer. Henry Furman, who helped out when we were trying to find panelists, the right panelists. So thank you, Henry.
Privileged to be here, and a hard act to follow. And what Sharon said, I endorse everything she said. Retired editor, mostly from the Copy Desk, Daily Times, 1990 to 2015. So I had the privilege of overlapping a little bit with Fred and Young One back in the day in the 90s. And just a little aside is toward the end of my career, I ran the Copy Desk, and by some quirk of organization, the photo department and Copy Desk went answer to the same deputy managing editor. So we became really close. I took pride in really connecting our 2 departments. And so kind of the unsung heroes of the newsrooms are people like copy editors and even the photographers, despite their presence in the product. Sometimes they're underappreciated. So it's been a real privilege. But Richard, thank you for your generosity in inviting me, but also occasionally dropping me into your newsletter when we try to do something to make the LA Times better. Always great to have your endorsement and all that. So my first time here, I hope it's not my last time. So
oh no,
great to see everybody. And
we'll be back here on Tuesday.
Someone used the word inspirational a minute ago. That's the word for the day. Just spectacular, inspiring stuff today. Thank you so much.
Richard, you might be muted.
Richard, your sound went out. You're
having
tech
problems. He needs a new computer.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, Beatrice McBride, please. Unmute.
Hi, I'm Beatrice McBride. I'm a freelance photographer based in Dallas, Texas. I'm the director of photography for the Denton Black Film Festival. And like Jason, I've been covering the Ahmaud Arbery trial for the last 1.5 years. And it's been quite stressful, not just being African-American and with white photographers, but being close to the family, you know, dealing with their stresses as well, trying to be objective. But it's been very rewarding. And I'll be, you know, photographing them for the next year or so.
All right. Thank you. Carolyn Lumsden.
Hi, I am Carolyn Lumsden, and I was former president of the Association of Opinion Journalists. God rest its soul. Richard, thank you. I love these roundtables. And Chester, I'm getting your book. I am now group opinion editor for Hearst, Connecticut Media, and I'm retiring in April. And Richard, I will be sending you that job listing because we need a wonderful person in that role.
Thank you, Carolyn. All right, Ann Talent, first timer.
Richard, thanks for having me. And I feel like this is like, I don't know if every session is like this, but I feel like I've been like with photo royalty today. So this is just an amazing experience. But just a little bit about me. I had spent 16.5 years at the Baltimore Sun as an editor in a variety of capacities. And then since August, I have been I've been the editor of Bethesda Magazine, which is a lifestyle magazine, and Bethesda Beat, which is a online news site covering Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a affluent and incredibly diverse suburb of Washington, D.C. This session has been informative in a lot of ways, but also I'm also always looking for strategies to, take good intent and turn it into being more representative in the coverage that we're providing and in the voices that we're featuring that are telling the story. So thanks for having me.
Man. All right, Jared Henderson.
Hey everyone, again, my name is Jared. I'm at USA Today as a senior multimedia producer in the investigative and enterprise video storytelling unit. I'm also the current academic representative for the National Association of Black Journalists, little brother to many of you, pledged by many of you, coached by many of you, and still just as thankful and have as much gratitude as I always have seeing these rooms filled with these faces. So thank you. To everyone who's here.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you. Lynn Adrian, board member.
Yeah, I am Lynn Adrian. I am the director of the Washington Graduate Program in Broadcast and Digital Journalism for the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Longtime network television producer before I moved into academia. And this is another hit out of the park session for the roundtable.
All right, thank you, thank you. Hank Klibanoff.
Well, good afternoon. It's good to be with you. I was going to stay for an hour. Obviously, I've just got hooked here. I am at Emory University, where I teach there. That was something that happened after 36 years as a newspaper reporter and editor in Mississippi and the Boston Globe and the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then as managing editor here at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I teach a course called the Georgia Civil Rights Cold Cases Project, in which my students examine unpunished racially motivated murders that took place in Georgia. We just spent all day yesterday way down in terrible Terrell County in Dawson, Georgia, working on a case there, as well as another season of my podcast, Buried Truths, which is based on these cases. My most recent, however, was not from the modern civil rights era. It was the more recent Ahmaud Arbery case, because as we say there, the Arbery case in 2020 sure looked an awful lot like a Georgia case in 1950. So that's what I do, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
All right, and you'll be with us again later. We'll be talking about that later, announcing that. John Watson, our American University partner.
Here I am. Yeah, I was a reporter and editor for Newhouse newspapers in Northern New Jersey and New York for 21 years. I tried to be a criminal defense attorney. I went back to graduate school, get a PhD, and now I'm teaching journalism at American University, and so proud to be partnered with Richard Prince in journalism. And I hope we can make it better than it is, although that probably isn't possible.
Thanks. Gwyneth Mellinger, unmute, please.
Hi there. This is my first time here. Richard has kindly invited me. I'm a professor at James Madison University, and I think he's interested in me because I wrote a book in 2013 about the newsroom diversity movement in the American Society of Newspaper Editors. And I've seen some folks on the call here today who I interviewed for my research, but currently I am a critical race theorist. So if you want to know what scary people who teach critical race theory look like, I am that person. And I'm sure that as I'm talking, people are not here, but elsewhere are calling or emailing the Virginia governor's hotline to let them know that they need to do something about me. But in any case, this is a wonderful opportunity to hear about things I really care about, and I did not expect to stay for 3.5 hours, but here I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gwyneth. Rod Hicks.
Thanks, Richard. Rod Hicks here. I'm the Director of Ethics and Diversity at the Society of Professional Journalists, longtime NABJ member, former board member. And before I got to SPJ, I worked in editing roles at the Associated Press, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Detroit News, Detroit Free Press, and a few other places.
All right, thank you, Rod. And from Paris, Joel Dreyfus.
I'm actually in New York for the
You're in New
time
York,
being,
okay.
but going back in a few weeks.
Okay.
I had a 50-year career in journalism. I'm happy that Roger Witherspoon can outrank me in that category. But years at the Washington Post, long time at Fortune magazine, and later on editor of various technology publications. So I've done a little bit of everything, including
And an NABJ founder.
And an ABJ founder. Yes, I was always a troublemaker. Great to be here with so many friends and new faces.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Ivan Roman.
Hi, Ivan Roman. I'm a freelance journalist out of Washington, D.C., working right now for History.com. I've been a journalist for decades in Rochester, New York, Miami, Florida, San Juan, and the Caribbean, and a media diversity advocate and advocacy for media policy through my work as executive director of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists at one point, and Unity Journalists of Color.
Okay, Hazel Edney.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hazel Trice Edney with the Trice Edney Newswire, editor-in-chief, as well as president of Trice Edney Communications. I also teach at the Kathy Hughes School of Communications, an adjunct professor teaching multicultural media history. I would be remiss if I did not add that this was an excellent roundtable, extraordinary, but it could have been even better had the Black press been included in the conversation.
Wait a minute, Fred Speech is one of the organizers.
Okay,
St. American.
Had the Black press been included in the conversation, then Regina you would not have had to ask Regina that question. And that's Regina Boone. That is Roy Lewis, who is watching by Facebook, who has had more years in Black press. He took pictures of Dr. King.
Roy Lewis was invited.
Okay, well, had they been included, I mean, Chevry. I don't know why there were no Black press photographers included.
So Hazel, what am I, chopped liver? What am I, chopped liver?
Hazel, that can be another round table.
Thank you, Hazel.
That can be another one.
That's all
I'm saying. All right, don't start on that. Won't be none.
Inclusion.
Richard, let me go next, Richard. Let me go next.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
Okay. Hi. The Black press was so strongly represented by Hazel and Ms. Boone, by the way, who I'd never met. So it's good to finally see what she looked like. My name is Todd Stephen Burrows. I used to do a lot of stuff. Now, I wasn't visible today because I was busy doing news headlines for the Black World Media Network, which is a brand new Pan-African website. And Don Rojas, who's in charge of that, will be talking about this on WBAI tomorrow. So we just want to remind you that there's a whole world outside of this white framework about the white editor and the white publisher and there's this whole world framework of which people are not worrying about what white media and how you struggle within white media and all that. And I say that as someone who's worked in white media, I got 3 white degrees, I get it. But there's some other things going on. And I think the Black Media World Network and what Hazel does and what other folks are doing is more representative as well of what's going on outside of this white hegemonic framework. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Craig Herndon.
Hey guys, let's see, Craig Herndon. I started the Washington Post in '68, but my most important role is Monica's dad. I know half the people on this matrix and probably related to another third of you. But I've known Richard for 1,000 years or about there, and was introduced to him by Ivan Brandon, who was on earlier. I don't know if he's still here or not. And we all worked at the Washington Post at a time when we could entertain calls from George Lincoln Rockwell talking about the commie Jew nigger experience, conspiracy rather, excuse me. And that's the world that I came out of. And I'm happy to be here with you guys. I'm a firm believer in journalism. And I think we got a lot of work to do in the future. And that work is diverse. Everybody needs to be doing it so that we can reestablish the meaning of truth and objectivity. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Johnny Bavera. All right. Oh, unmute, please.
Okay, here we go. So I was Johnny's iPhone earlier, and
okay.
I couldn't relay back as I was driving in the car. But this is my first time roundtable with everyone, and I am very impressed, very astonished at the great discussions that are on here. And so I just kind of kicking back and listening and kind of getting the feel of what the group is about. So hopefully I can get invited back and maybe provide some insight into my background. So my background is, I'm a retired military, Navy photojournalist. And so I carry a lot of the mentoring to those following behind me in military photography. So I started a workshop, it's called Shoot Off Visual Media Workshops, and we mentor in stills and video. So we do, well, up until the pandemic, we would do 2 to 3 of these workshops a year, one out of state from DC. But hopefully I can get back into it, and I rely on a lot of my professional colleagues out there to come help and volunteer to mentor and teach and help with their transition, because they're not going to be in the military forever. Eventually they're going to like get out and look for a real job and you know, do this you know, in the real world, I guess. We've had a lot of, you know, a lot of veterans that are now in the civilian sector that are doing really well as photojournalists. I mean, they're all over the place. So that's
okay. You know, there's a group called Military Veterans in Journalism, and they're always looking for members and to network among each other. And the representative was here a few months ago, so you might want to hook up with them too.
That's great.
Let me go to Young Wan Kang, who wanted to add something to one of our panelists who wanted to add something. Young Wan.
I really appreciate everybody's input today. I just wanted to add that after 36 years in mainstream journalism, I can say that if news is what happens near an editor, lots of editors who I've worked for doesn't really know what's going on. And that's because they just have a very narrow life experiences, and they just don't know what they don't know. In 1987, when the South Korean democracy movement was going on, I went to the LA Times foreign editor, Al Schuster, and told him that I think we got something going on here. Maybe I should go over and help out our Tokyo correspondent. LA Times did not even have a bureau in Seoul at the time. And he said, nah, I think we're okay. Well, next week I was on the plane. I went to Korea and met up with Sam in Korea, and I worked nonstop for the next many months. And what came out of that was a new constitution that's going to elect their next 7th president in 10 days. And Korea became the beacon of democracy in Asia ever since.
Okay, Mama.
And
who is Sam, by the way, that you met up with?
Sam Jameson.
Okay.
Who was an Asia expert based in Japan. And basically, he did cover what he could, but he only covered based on what he can get in the English language media and the interpreter that he was working with. And I was able to deliver him what I actually saw on the streets every night and got that reflected in his report. And it made all the difference to have somebody who's not only bilingual, but biliteral, and be able to get around and understand local culture and language and what was going on. And, you know, at Reuters, for many years, I've watched a person from Australia running North America, person from South America going to China. And you get these superficial coverage and perspective and absence of knowledge of institutional history. And it's reflected in the final product when you have people who are picked by managers because they only know what they know and they don't know what else is available. And I think in this time and age, we need to broaden the perspectives and horizons of decision makers to not only approach stories like Tarjan coming in, just looking at it from afar, and not the ground up story that we could be working on with in-depth knowledge and history. And recently, I was somewhat disappointed that the New York Times appointed a European photographer to be the Asia photo editor, now based in Seoul. And good luck to him, but that's about 8,000 years of history. He's going to have to learn really quickly to understand what's going on.
Right.
So
right.
Just
Next
wanted
point.
to add that some of our editors that we work with, they're nice people, but they just don't know what they don't know.
Exactly. I don't think we'll get too much of a disagreement in this room. Okay, Chevry Lassiter, please.
Here I come. Hi, I'm Chevry Lassiter. I'm the photo editor at the Washington Informer and also produce the digital broadcast program each Friday at noon. Tune in. Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. Jackie Jones. Jackie, are you there? Unmute, please. Okay, we'll get back to Jackie. Paul Delaney. Unmute, please.
I thought you had already introduced me.
All right, never mind. If we already got you, then we got you. Yeah. Rachel Jones. Rachel, can you unmute, please? Maybe she's not there. Okay. Is there anybody we have not gotten yet?
Me, Richard.
Oh, Benita, I don't even see you on the screen here. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, you have to go to number 1. Hello, everyone. I am Benita Bing. I am the producer of this Zoom broadcast. Also, the president of the Exposure Group, African American Photographers Association, located here in Washington, D.C. And also owner of the Talbert and Bing Studios, located in Brooklyn, Northeast DC. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we only have 8 minutes left in this Zoom conversation. The Zoom reserve. We've only reserved 8 more minutes for this conversation. So I want to say, did you have something, Rebecca, that you needed to get in? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to let everybody know that we'll be back here again on Tuesday to talk about Ukraine with Malcolm Nance and
You're muffled.
Koye. Sorry, I want to make sure I got that right. So if you haven't signed up for that, just let me know via the chat or by some other means, and we'll hook you up. So thank you, everybody. Thank you people on Facebook as well, and thank our panelists especially. I think we all learned things, and we got to share. As Hong Wong said, you don't know what you don't know, and I think now we know what we don't know and need to find out about. So thanks once again, and as I said, we'll see you next. See some of you on Tuesday, and others later on in the month. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for inviting me.
Thank you, Richard.
You'll all be getting copies of what was in the chat room later on.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
You're the man, Richard.
All right.
Okay.
Take
Thank
care.
you,
See you
Fred and
guys.
Richard.
Good to see you guys.
See everyone in NABJ.
Okay.
Back live. Finally.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
First time
Okay.
in 2 years.
Oh, great, great. Where is it going to be?
Las Vegas.
Oh, boy. That's going to be a great
With
time.
NAHJ, by the way.
Yeah, with age, absolutely.
Oh, okay, okay. Very
Yeah.
good. Good to
Okay.
see you.
Good seeing you, Bob.
Okay, man.
Take care, everybody.
All
Thanks,
right.
Richard.
Craig, and oh boy, this is like old home week.